watching the Mystical Green Beanie.
Hey, what is going on, Nachos? I am the Mystical Green Beanie, and I know that I've said some pretty negative things on Dan Slott and his run on Spider-Man, especially in the past year where it seems like I've had a massive heel turn on his run on the character. But here's the thing. I was wrong, and I admit that because when you look at everything objectively, Dan Slott is the greatest Spider-Man writer in the history of Marvel. He just is. And here are my reasons for my reasoning. First things first, he made Peter Parker young and sexy like he was in the 70s. And I know that a lot of people have claimed that this move was regressive in regards to the character, but here's what you don't understand. It's not regressive because it's just the natural state of that character, and it's what he always should have been. And Dan Slott, as well as Marvel, were aware of this. And the best possible thing to do would have been to undo the marriage so that Peter could be free to throw himself to all the lovely ladies in his life and to make sure that he's not tied down by that horrible, overrated skank Mary Jane Watson who, let's be honest, nobody really cared about in the first place. Something else that Dan Slott really understands is that Peter Parker, at his core, isn't a nuanced character. He's not a real person. He's a larger-than-life archetype, much like Bruce Wayne or Clark Kent. He's the goofy nerd who's the punchline of everybody's jokes. He's the awkward sausage that never grew out of his weird high school quirks and never fully progressed into adulthood. That's Peter Parker, and I find that really fascinating that Dan is the only writer who really understands that concept. Another thing that I love about Dan's run is that he made Spider-Man a big-time hero who's on the level of the Avengers and the Fantastic Four. And it's really fitting because Spider-Man doesn't work as a street-level hero anymore. Because in the real world, Spider-Man is an A-list superhero, so it's only natural that his adventures and status reflect that within the Marvel Universe. That's why Spider-Verse and Spider-Island and Ends of the Earth work so well as stories, because those are big-time threats for a big-time hero. I also really appreciate what Dan Slott has done with Spider-Man's villains. Something that a lot of writers are scared to do is to subvert expectation and beg the real important questions about these villains. Are these characters tragic victims of their own scientific curiosity, or are they just bad people? Is Kurt Connors really a good guy? Is Michael Morbius truly a monster? And at the end of the day, isn't Black Cat really just Catwoman, but evil? It truly is genius, the level of thought that he puts behind these characters and how he makes them more black and white than they originally were. Finally, this is something that Dan Slott has brought to our attention, and it's something that is very important, and every Spider-Man writer should take note of this. Spider-Man is who Peter Parker really is, because the identity of Peter Parker is really just a facade. He's not an exaggerated cartoon character that Peter Parker came up with when he was developing the concept of Spider-Man. That's just his true identity. And I find it baffling and truly offensive that no other writer has thought to do this before. But yeah guys, Dan Slott is a genius. He's a man who's clearly ahead of his time in regards to writing Spider-Man, and he's thinking about the character on an intellectual level that most haters just haven't achieved. So you know what? If you are one of those fanboys who's harassing Dan on the internet, it's time to stop.
It's time to stop!
It's time to stop.
It's time to stop!
And instead, it's time to recognize the complex genius that is Dan Slott and his run on Spider-Man. And honestly, I hope that he never leaves the book, because objectively, he's the only writer who's fit to write this character. Anyways, that's the video. I hope you liked it, and I hope that you learned something. As always, I'm the Mystical Green Beanie. Thank you for watching, and as always, until next time, adios dudes and dudettes, adios.